Hello everyone and welcome to the Theme B part of the Specimen paper for 2025. So this is the only paper that IB has released that's official and that has the questions for the new syllabus. So make sure to stick around the whole time and really think about the questions so you can prepare yourself for the exam. Let's start off with the paper 1A, and we're doing a standard level in this video. So the multiple choice. So starting off, the diagram shows the elements present in two organic molecules, W and X. Which molecules could W and X be? Okay, what we're gonna do is, you might know the format by now if you've watched other videos, but I'm gonna count down from 3, and you can pause there and think about it, but I'm just gonna do that so that the video is quick and we can move through the papers quickly. So 3, 2, and 1. So the answer is C. Why? Okay, so you need to look at both of them, right? So in A, monosaccharides do not have phosphorus. So even though amino acids can have nitrogen, no, actually they all have nitrogen, right? Because monosaccharides don't have phosphorus, A is incorrect. B, same thing. Triglycerides don't have nitrogen, but nucleic acids do have phosphorus. But again, incorrect. And D, triglycerides do not have phosphorus, okay? And fatty acids also don't have nitrogen, so that's just like completely false. However, C is correct. Okay. Moving on. So what molecules are produced during the hydrolysis of a triglyceride molecule? This should be straightforward. Again, 3, 2, and 1. It's fatty acids and glycerol. Remember, a triglyceride is made of 1 glycerol joined by 3 fatty acids. And again, if you don't remember some of these concepts, we have videos on all of the individual subtopics, so you can always go back and have a browse. Next question. The diagrams show the structure of leucine, an essential amino acid. Which diagram highlights the part of leucine that distinguishes it from other amino acids? The variable part, okay? So again, 3, 2, and 1. It's B. So if you remember the structure of an amino acid, it has a central carbon, which is attached to a COOH, to an NH2, so the amino group, a hydrogen, and then a variable part, okay? Which is everything else, basically. So that's why A is incorrect. It's missing part of the variable group. Here in C, that's just the constant part. And then in D, it's just a random part that they've picked right over here. So it's B. Okay. Which is a feature of phloem sieve tube cells? Okay, 3, 2, and 1. They don't have a nucleus. So remember, they don't have numerous chloroplasts. That's mostly in cells and leaves on the palisade mesophyll. They don't have lignified walls. That's the xylem. And then they do have cytoplasm. They have less than normal cells, but they do have some. But they don't have a nucleus to allow sap to flow through. Right. Next question. So the image shows a glycoprotein embedded in the phospholipid bilayer of a cell membrane. Which features of this glycoprotein can be deduced from the image? Careful, okay? Only things that can be deduced from the image. I know a lot of you have a vivid imagination, but don't use it here. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. C. Why? Okay. So you see it's not a peripheral protein, just because you can see it's embedded inside the membrane, right? So that already means that it's integral, right? It could be a channel protein. However, you don't see a channel forming, right? If it were a channel protein, you would see maybe one part here, and then a hole forming for it to be a channel. But this is not. It doesn't look like a channel at all, right? In terms of a transport protein, same thing. It doesn't really look like it has a hole in it, right? So it doesn't seem like things could pass through. We do know it's an integral protein, and it may be involved in cell recognition. We don't know that for sure, but it may be. And the presence, if you see these hexagons, right? What are these? These are carbohydrates. And remember, when a protein is attached to carbohydrates, right, it normally, or a lot of times, it is involved in cell recognition. So that's why C is correct. Okay, what occurs at gas exchange surfaces in the lungs of mammals? 3, 2, and 1, all of them. So obviously gases diffuse across a moist surface and the alveoli. Also, concentration gradients are maintained by ventilation, just meaning you get an oxygen so that there's a concentration gradient with the blood. But also water is lost, right? That's because, remember, the alveoli has a moist surface, and when it encounters the dry air from outside, there's a natural loss of water. That's why on really, really cold days, when you breathe out, you can see your breath, right? That's that water being lost. All right. Next question. The number of hummingbird species in South America and I will highlight this word species, has increased continuously as shown in the graph. What could be the reason for the increase in the number of hummingbird species during the period labeled set? Think this one carefully, okay? 3, 2, and 1. C. Why? The main thing is it's an increase in species, not an increase in actual hummingbirds, right? Meaning, A is incorrect because intraspecific competition does not happen between different species, right? Second, or B, closely related species can coexist indefinitely in the same niche. That's incorrect because there's a limited number of nutrients, right? And space. However, C, a wide range of unoccupied potential niches exist, leading to adaptive radiation. Now that's true because so unoccupied potential niches, right? Basically, it means that if a previous hummingbird ate one type of nut but not another, there's space for a new hummingbird to arise which eats the type of nut that the other one wasn't eating, okay? Basically, again, you can review these concepts by going back to the topic videos, but this basically means that it would explain why new species are being formed. And then D doesn't make sense because if there were a few limiting factors, again, that would just increase the number of the same hummingbird species but not lead to the creation of new species. Good. So, the preferred temperature ranges for the 3 species of trout that are found together in freshwater lakes in North America are shown. Wow, that was a mouthful. What can be deduced from this information? All right. Okay, once again, think now, pause, and 3, 2, and 1. It's 1 and 3. Okay, so brown trout do not have the most specialized niche, right? If you look at it, it's actually like 11 to 23, right? So that shares a lot of its range with the other ones, okay, with the rainbow trout and the lake trout. Then lake trout can avoid competition by living in colder water. Now that's true to some extent, right? From the range of 6 degrees to 11 degrees, it's by itself. No other trouts are going to be there, so no competition. And then 1, the niches all overlap. That's obvious, right? They all overlap to some extent. So, hope that makes sense. Next question and last question for paper 1A. So which row of the table describes a type of nutrition? I know there's a lot in that table. Read through it. 3, 2, and 1. It's C. Why? Okay, so autotrophs. They do get energy from sunlight. Their source of carbon, organic molecules containing carbon. That's not true. They get carbon dioxide from the air, right? Then B. Heterotrophs. Source of energy is sunlight. That's not true. They eat other animals, right? We don't do photosynthesis. Mixotrophs, those can do heterotrophic nutrition as well as autotrophic nutrition. So it's correct, right? They can use sunlight, but also organic molecules from animals they eat as energy. They can use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but also organic molecules containing carbon from what they eat as a source of carbon. And as we just said, so they do photosynthesis, but also they ingest, so they consume other animals. And then consumers, right, which are just a type of heterotrophs, right, is incorrect because they don't do photosynthesis. Okay. Moving on, paper 1B. There's not much on this for theme B, but the first one is the micrograph shows a transverse section of a leaf from a flowering plant. Draw a plant diagram in the right-hand box with labels to show the distribution of tissues in this transverse section of a leaf for 3 marks. All right, 3, 2, and 1. It should look something like this, right? It should have, remember, so first the waxy cuticle above, right? That's what we see here. Then the upper epidermis, which we see here, that first layer of cells. Then we have the palisade mesophyll, that's what does photosynthesis, and it's these cells that are very tightly bunched here, followed by, well, it's not in my diagram, but by the spongy mesophyll, right? And in between, you'll often find the xylem and the phloem. And then at the bottom, oh, it is in the diagram, sorry, it's here. And then also at the bottom, you can find guard cells and the stomata. Okay, so calculate the actual thickness of the leaf from upper to lower surface along the line AB, showing your working. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, bear in mind, these calculations are probably very different to what you're getting if you're using a ruler, because when I measured it, right, the window was probably another size. So don't take the measurements actually to heart. Just use a ruler, and also in the exam it will be way different because it'll be on paper, okay? But just so we're like to make up a scenario. If I measure the scale bar with my ruler and it's 1 centimeter, and I measure AB and that's 2.5 centimeters, right? This measures about 2.5 scale bars, right? Which is 2.5 times 200 or 500 micrometers, and that's 0.5 millimeters. So that's how you work it out. You measure this with a ruler, you measure this with a ruler, and then you divide. Okay, moving on to paper 2. Okay, starting off with data analysis. So, a long-term study looked at the effect of diets with differing fiber content in 543 children between the ages of 8 months and 9 years. The children were divided into groups according to the amount of fiber in their diet. The chart shows the sources of fiber for the 9-year-olds as a percentage of the total fiber intake. Okay, starting off, state the source of fiber that provides 5% of the fiber intake for those in the high fiber group. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. It's breakfast cereal. So if you look here, right, so the low fiber group are the circles, and for the high fiber ones are the squares. That's what I meant to say. And for breakfast cereals, they're right on the line that's 5%, right? This first line that goes across. So next one, state the percentage of the daily fiber intake obtained from fruit by the low fiber group. Okay, now the circles, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so about 12%, right? It's a little further than the line for 10, but not yet 15. So 12, if you said 11, 13, that would be fine as well. Okay, so compare and contrast the fiber intake of the two groups for 2 marks. Okay, so you have to say 2 things. And 3, in 2, and in 1. Okay, so both get most of their fiber from bread. That's obvious, right? Much more than any other of the food groups. They also have a similar percentage for vegetables over here, right? And they show a similar pattern overall. However, the high fiber diet gets much more fiber from fruit, and then the low fiber, you could say, gets more from grains and breakfast cereals as well, if you wanted to. So be as exhaustive as you can if you have time in these exercises, okay? Because they're really, really simple. They're very low-hanging fruit. Like, it's easy to get these marks. Just make sure to write enough. Okay, explain whether it's possible to determine from the data which group eats the most grains in a day. Careful, because this is tricky. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so when it's saying which group eats the most grains in a day, okay, you need to realize what the data is showing you, and that's showing you daily intake, okay, so as a percentage. So when it's a percentage, you actually don't know the quantities they're taking in, right? So even though in the graph you can see that the low fiber group takes a higher percentage of grains, it may be a higher percentage of a tiny amount, right? I think it's still somewhat possible to say that they're eating most grains in proportion to whatever they're eating, right? But you could be fooled, right? In most cases, you might be right. But if, say, for example, the high fiber diet is eating way more food overall, right? Even though it's less of a percentage, they could be eating more grains than the low fiber group, if that makes sense. Great. So now, suggest with a reason based on the data in the chart one food that should be increased for children on the low fiber diet. Okay. 3, 2, and 1. Okay. So mostly bread and fruit, right? So if you look at the kids in the low fiber diet, they eat way less bread, they eat way less fruit, right? Everything else is either the same or actually they eat more of. So those are the 2 things. So that's quite straightforward. So next, the graph shows how the energy intake of the 13-month-old children varied with the daily intake of fiber and the percentage of this energy that came from fat. Okay, so compare the effect of increasing daily dietary fiber intake on total energy intake and percentage of total energy from fat. Okay, that's a lot, but it's only 1 mark. So read through the graphs and 3, 2, and 1. Okay, so obviously increasing fiber intake increases total energy intake. That's clear, right, with the positive correlation here. And it also lowers the percentage of energy from fat based on the negative correlation there. I think that's pretty straightforward. Fiber is known to have no energy value. Suggest a reason for the relationship between dietary fiber intake and total energy intake. Okay, I think this is again straightforward. 3, 2, and 1. It's likely that even though fiber itself has no energy value, the foods that contain the fiber have molecules with a lot of energy in them, right? Okay. Next question, discuss whether the study supports the hypothesis that high fiber diets are healthy for children. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, it does, right? Because you see that when you eat more fiber, you have more energy, which is a good thing. And also you eat less fat, which is also a good thing, right? So 2 things that you can say, it's 1 mark. So with 1, it should probably be enough. Moving on. So this is the last question. So the structure of a part of cellulose molecule is shown. Identify the monomer from which cellulose is composed for 1 mark. So super simple. 3, 2, and 1. beta glucose, right? Remember, starch and glycogen are made from alpha glucose, cellulose is made from beta glucose. And then the second part, explain how the structure of cellulose is related to its function, and this will be the end of this video. So 3, 2, and 1. All right, so there's many things you can say here. So first, the monomers, right, of beta glucose are bound together by covalent bonds formed by condensation reactions, remember, and that means that the molecule is very strong, right, because covalent bonds are very strong. Then also remember that cellulose is not only made by one chain, but it's many, many chains stacked together, and that's allowed by branching. So by not having branches, it can stack very neatly and very tightly through hydrogen bonds, which makes it very, very strong as well. So this chain molecule shape, right, allows for them to stack up and form a very rigid structure, which is great because cellulose is structural. And then finally, beta glucose molecules provide energy. So if you break these bonds, you release energy, which is great in case it's required, right? Remember, starch is the main energy molecule for plants, but if required, cellulose can also provide energy. Amazing. So this is the end of this video. I hope you learned something, and next week we'll be back with the higher level one, and following that we'll start theme C. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments, and until then, I'll see you next week. Good luck, everyone. Bye.